She walked in wearing a $4,000 dress and stopped dead in her tracks. Her wine glass slipped, shattered on the marble floor. Every head in the restaurant turned. But Victoria Whitmore didn't hear a thing. Because the man sitting at her private table, her table reserved every Thursday for 15 years, had a face she had buried in a cemetery. Her husband's face. Her dead husband's face. And the stranger looked up, smiled that same crooked half-smile that had once made her say yes at the altar, and said, "Sorry, ma'am, is this your seat? Who are you, and why does God keep sending me your face? Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels from your hometown all the way around the world. And if this kind of story hits different for you, subscribe and hit that bell. We post every week. Don't miss what's coming." The night it happened, Ethan Callaway was already running on empty. 14 hours on base. 2 meetings with command that went sideways. A phone call with Mia's school that ended with a guidance counselor using the phrase, "She seems to be withdrawing socially," which was the kind of thing that sat in a father's chest like a stone and didn't move no matter how many miles he ran before sunrise. He was 45 minutes late to meet Danny Reyes, his oldest friend from his first deployment, at a restaurant called the Harbor Lantern, one of those places with low lighting and white tablecloths and prices that made Ethan quietly recalculate his monthly budget in his head. Danny had insisted. "My treat," he'd said. "You've been carrying everything alone for too long. Let somebody buy you a real dinner for once." Ethan had said yes. Not because he wanted the food, because he was tired of eating leftovers over the kitchen sink at 9 p.m. while Mia slept and the apartment felt like it was slowly closing in on him. The hostess at the front was handling 3 things at once when he walked in a large reservation, arguing about table placement. A phone pressed between her shoulder and her ear, and a tray that was seconds from disaster. She looked up at Ethan, said Reyes party, and he nodded. Because yes, he was there for the Reyes party, and she waved a hand toward the back of the restaurant without looking at him again. "Second corridor, last table on the left." He thanked her and walked back. The restaurant was quiet in the way that expensive places are always quiet, not silent, but controlled. The kind of place where conversations were kept low and personal and private. Piano music from somewhere. The smell of something with butter and garlic. A couple near the window leaning close to each other like the rest of the room didn't exist. Ethan found the table, last one on the left. Tucked into a semi-private alcove with a single candle in the center, a small arrangement of white flowers, and 2 place settings. A leather-bound menu already open. A glass of water already poured. He sat down. He pulled out his phone to text Danny. He'd arrived, saw he had 3 unread messages from Mia's school app, and put the phone face down on the table because he couldn't deal with that yet. He'd deal with it when he got home. He'd deal with all of it when he got home. That was always the plan. Get through the day. Get home. Deal with it. He picked up the menu and tried to focus. He was still staring at the appetizer section, trying to decide if $24 shrimp was something he could justify in good conscience when he heard it. A sound like a gunshot. Sharp, sudden, followed by a cascade of smaller sounds. Breaking crystal hitting marble in stages, each piece bouncing and scattering in a different direction. He was on his feet before he consciously decided to move. Old reflex. You hear something break, something shatter, you react. 15 years in the Navy had made his body faster than his thoughts in moments of sudden disruption. He turned toward the sound. A woman stood at the entrance to the alcove. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. The kind of beauty that didn't need softness because it came from somewhere deeper, somewhere shaped by years of holding herself together under pressure. She was wearing a dress the color of midnight hair pulled back in a way that looked both effortless and precise, and her eyes dark wide currently fixed on him with an expression he had never seen on another person's face in his entire life. Not anger, not embarrassment about the glass, something else entirely. She looked like she had seen something impossible. A broken wine glass and a small pool of dark red were at her feet. She hadn't moved. She wasn't looking at the glass. She was looking at him, and her face had gone the particular shade of pale that Ethan associated with people receiving terrible news, the color that happened when the blood decides to go somewhere else because the heart needs it more. Around them, 2 nearby tables had gone quiet. A waiter was already moving toward the mess, but the woman hadn't moved. Ethan took 1 step toward her, not thinking, just responding to the obvious fact that someone was distressed, and said, "Hey, are you all right?" Her lips parted. She said nothing. "Ma'am?" He took another step. She still didn't move. "I think maybe you should sit down." And then something broke through whatever trance had held her frozen, and she said in a voice that was quieter than he expected, and completely controlled, as if she was forcing each word to behave, "That's my table." Ethan stopped, looked back at the alcove, looked at the 2 place settings. The white flowers, the reserved card he had not noticed because it was tucked behind the candle. "Oh," he said. And then, because 15 years of military life had not entirely eliminated his capacity to feel like an idiot. "Oh no." He stepped back immediately. "I'm so sorry. The hostess, I think there was a miscommunication up front. She pointed me back here and I'm in the wrong seat. I'm sorry." He was already reaching for his phone, already putting distance between himself and the table. But the woman still hadn't moved. She was still looking at him, not at the table, not at the mess on the floor, at him. At his face specifically, in a way that was starting to make him genuinely uncomfortable, not because it felt threatening, but because it felt like something he didn't have the context to understand, like someone reading a page from a book he'd never heard of. "Sir." The waiter arrived at his elbow, professional and apologetic. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. Let me help you find your correct table." "Thank you," Ethan said. He looked back at the woman one more time. "Again, I'm sorry about the confusion. I hope your evening gets better." She finally spoke again. "What's your name?" It wasn't an aggressive question. It wasn't even a loud one. It was the kind of question that comes out of someone's mouth before they've fully decided to ask it, raw and unfiltered, like it bypassed every filter of social caution. Ethan paused. "Ethan? Ethan Calloway." She absorbed that like it meant something. "Navy." She was looking at the regulation haircut, the posture, the particular way he carried himself, that people always told him announced his branch before he said a word. "Yes, ma'am." "Rank?" "Commander." She nodded once very slowly, as if pieces of something were clicking into place she hadn't expected to find. "I'm Victoria Whitmore," she said. He recognized the name. Most people in the country recognize that name. Victoria Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Technologies. One of the largest private tech companies in the United States, worth somewhere in the range of $4 billion, widowed about 15 or 16 years ago, known for being brilliant and driven and almost completely private outside of boardrooms. He had not expected to find her in a restaurant alcove looking like the floor had dropped out from under her. "Nice to meet you," he said, because he didn't know what else to say. "Again, I'm truly sorry for the trouble." "Don't apologize." She finally moved, took a step back, allowed the waiter to guide her toward her chair while another staff member cleaned the floor. She sat down, picked up her menu, then put it down again. Looked at him one more time as the waiter led him away toward a table in the opposite section of the restaurant. Ethan didn't look back. He found his actual table. He texted Danny here. "Wrong table drama. Tell you about it." He ordered water and tried to figure out what had just happened to a woman who could buy the entire building they were sitting in, and apparently hadn't been prepared for a Navy officer with a bad sense of direction. He didn't know that Victoria Whitmore across the restaurant was sitting with her hands flat on the tablecloth, and her menu untouched, staring at the far wall, and seeing her husband's face everywhere she looked. Danny Reyes arrived 20 minutes late, which was on time by Danny's personal schedule. He operated on a system only he understood, and somehow always ended up exactly where he needed to be. He was broad-shouldered, shorter than Ethan, with a dark beard going gray at the edges, and the particular energy of a man who had survived enough bad situations to find most regular problems genuinely funny. He dropped into the chair across from Ethan, flagged down a waiter with military efficiency and said, "You look terrible." "Thanks." "No, I mean you look specifically like someone punched you in the chest without touching you. What happened between the parking lot and this table?" Ethan told him. Danny listened. He was a good listener, always had been one of those men who went still when someone was talking, really still like the information mattered and deserved actual attention. When Ethan finished, Danny said, "Victoria Whitmore." "Yeah." "And she just stared at you." "Like I was a ghost." Danny picked up his menu, studied it, set it back down. "You know who she is, right? Her husband died, 15, 16 years ago? Some kind of accident. I remember because it was all over the news for a while, and then she went completely dark, didn't give an interview for years." "I vaguely remember something. She built that whole company after he died, like poured everything into it. People say she works 18-hour days and has no personal life to speak of." He paused. "You must really look like this guy." "I apparently look exactly like this guy." Ethan finally picked up his menu. "Which is a sentence I genuinely never expected to say." "Did she say anything else?" "She asked my name, my rank." Danny raised an eyebrow. "She asked your rank?" "Yeah. That's not a normal thing to ask a stranger you just scared out of your table." "I know." They ordered. They ate. They talked about easier things. Danny's kids, his retirement plans, an old story from their first deployment that got funnier every time either of them told it. Ethan relaxed incrementally the way he always did around Danny, like a hinge slowly working itself loose after being stuck too long. But twice during dinner, he glanced toward the other side of the restaurant. Victoria Whitmore was still there, sitting alone, her dinner plate barely touched, her glass refilled but not finished. And once, just once, she was looking back. She looked away the moment he saw it. He told himself it meant nothing. He picked Mia up from his neighbor Mrs. Patterson's apartment at 9:30, which was later than he liked, but earlier than some nights, and carried her up the stairs half asleep with her head on his shoulder and her sneakers still on her feet. She weighed almost nothing. That always surprised him. How a person who took up so much of his heart and his days and his thoughts and his worries could be so physically small, so easy to carry. He tucked her in, pulled her blanket up, sat on the edge of her bed for a moment in the dark listening to her breathe. This was the part of the day he never told anyone about. Not Danny, not the guys on base, not the therapist the Navy had recommended after Lauren died, who he'd seen twice and then stopped going to, because he didn't know how to explain that the grief wasn't the problem. The grief he could carry, it was the fear, the specific middle-of-the-night fear that he would somehow do this wrong, that he would be too tired or too absent or too broken in the places that mattered most, and Mia would grow up feeling the empty space where two parents were supposed to stand. She shifted in her sleep, turned toward him slightly the way she always did, like even unconscious, she could feel he was there. He breathed out. He stayed another few minutes. Then he went to the kitchen, made himself a cup of coffee. He probably shouldn't have this late, sat at the table with the school app messages open and read what the guidance counselor had sent. Mia has been quieter than usual in class. She doesn't engage much with other students during free time. She's not in any trouble. She's sweet and well-behaved, but we want to make sure she has support at home. Would you be able to come in for a conversation? He read it 3 times. She's sweet and well-behaved. He knew. She was always well-behaved. She had been well-behaved in a very particular, very careful way since she was old enough to understand that her father had a lot to manage, and she didn't want to add to it. And that was the part that broke him open a little every time he thought about it. Not that she was troubled, but that she was compensating. An 8-year-old girl compensating. He wrote back to the counselor, said he'd come in Thursday, put his phone face down, finished his coffee. Then he got up, rinsed the mug, turned off the kitchen light, and stood in the doorway of his apartment for a moment in the dark. The Navy had given him purpose. The Navy had given him structure, discipline, a reason to get up and move before sunrise. But the Navy couldn't do this part. Couldn't come home at night. couldn't read the bedtime messages, or sit in the dark outside a child's room and carry the weight of being someone's whole world. That was his alone. He'd do it again tomorrow, and the day after. That was the deal he'd made the night Lauren died, holding a 3-year-old Mia who didn't understand what the crying meant, who kept patting his face with her small hand like she was trying to fix something. "I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'll figure all of it out." He was still working on it. 3 days later, he got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He was between a morning briefing and a logistics meeting, standing in a corridor on base with his cover under his arm, and approximately 6 minutes before he needed to be somewhere else. He answered anyway. "Commander Calloway." The voice was controlled professional, with a precision that suggested someone accustomed to being listened to. He knew it immediately. "Ms. Whitmore." A brief pause. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize my voice." "It's a distinctive voice." He moved toward a quieter section of the corridor. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources." "Not arrogant, just factual. I wanted to apologize for my behavior the other night. I was not myself, and I'm sure that was unsettling." "You don't need to apologize for that. I'd like to all the same." Another pause, shorter. "Would you be willing to meet just briefly? I have something I'd like to show you, and I'd rather do it in person than try to explain over the phone." Ethan stood very still in the corridor. Every practical instinct he had said, "This is not your situation. This woman is a stranger. Whatever she needs from this resemblance, whatever echo of her dead husband she thinks she's seeing in your face, that's her grief, not your responsibility." But there was something in her voice that he recognized. Not the wealth, not the authority. Something underneath all of that, something much quieter. The particular tone of someone who has been holding a question for a very long time and has run out of ways to avoid asking it. He knew that tone. He used it himself sometimes when he was asking the questions he'd been putting off. "All right," he said. When they met at a coffee shop, her suggestion which surprised him. He had expected her world, her environment, some place where she controlled the atmosphere. Instead, she named a small independent coffee house about a mile from the naval base. A place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls, and none of the polish he associated with her. When he arrived, she was already there. No assistant, no staff. Just Victoria Whitmore sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees already ordered and a closed manila envelope resting under her hands. She looked different from the restaurant. Still put together, still the kind of composed that comes from years of practice, but quieter somehow. Like she'd set something down she usually carried. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course." He sat, looked at the coffees. "You ordered. Black 2 sugars, I guessed." He took a sip. It was exactly right, which was mildly unnerving. "I have a question before I show you this," she said, "and I want you to answer honestly, even if it seems strange." "All right. Have you ever looked into your family history, your father's side specifically?" The question landed odd. He kept his face neutral, another skill the Navy had given him. "Why? Because I've spent the last 3 days doing something I don't normally do," she said. "I've been going through old records, my husband's records, his time in the Navy." Ethan went still. "Your husband was Navy?" "Yes." She held his gaze with an evenness that cost her something. He could see it cost her. "His name was Nathan Whitmore. He served for 11 years. He disappeared during a classified operation 17 years ago. His body was never recovered." She paused. "He was declared dead 4 years after he went missing. I fought it for 3 years before I stopped." The corridor went quiet in Ethan's memory. He was cataloging, sorting. 17 years ago, he had been 22. In his 2nd year of service. He tried to place himself in that timeline. "I served during that period," he said carefully. "I know." She slid the manila envelope across the table. "Open it." He did. Inside was a photograph. Old, slightly worn at the edges, the color slightly faded the way photographs get when they've been handled many times over many years. It showed a man in civilian clothes standing outdoors somewhere, what looked like a coast, somewhere rocky and cold. He was smiling. A real smile, the kind that took over the whole face without asking permission first. Ethan looked at the photograph for a long time. He looked at it the way you look at something your brain is refusing to process correctly. Then he put it on the table and looked at Victoria. "Is this a joke?" His voice came out quieter than he intended. "No, because this..." He picked it up again, forced himself to look at it again. The jaw, the eyes, the particular angle of the mouth in a smile. "This is not similar to me. This is..." "I know what it is," Victoria said. Her voice didn't waver. "I've been looking at that face for 17 years. I know it better than I know my own." She paused. "When you sat down at my table and looked up at me, it was exactly like that photograph. The angle, the expression, the..." She stopped, collected herself. "I dropped the glass because I thought I was losing my mind." Ethan set the photograph down slowly. He was not a man who spooked easily. He had been in situations that tested every instinct he had, and he'd learned to think before reacting, to take in information before drawing conclusions. But this information was taking its time. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Anything. What do you actually want from this, from me? Because I need to understand what you're looking for here." She considered the question with more seriousness than he expected, like she'd already asked herself and hadn't fully resolved it. "Truthfully," she said, "I don't know yet, but I've spent 15 years avoiding questions because I thought the answers would hurt too much. And then you walked into my restaurant." She looked at the photograph, then back at him. "I think I need to know if this is a coincidence, and I think you deserve to know too, even if you don't know yet that there's something to know." It was a complicated answer. It was also, he thought, an honest one. "You said you went through his Navy records," Ethan said. "What did you find?" "His service overlapped with yours. Different operations, different commands, but there's a period of about 8 months where the records go quiet, on his side and on yours. Both sets of documents have sections that are classified, and the classification codes are the same." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, quiet and specific, like a door moving on old hinges. He had known about those 8 months. He had spent years telling himself they weren't important. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I know. This might go nowhere." "I know that too." She reached across the table, not to touch him, just to pick up the photograph and look at it one more time before sliding it back into the envelope. "But I think we both know it won't go nowhere." He didn't argue with that. He picked up his coffee, drank it, put it down. "Tell me about Nathan," he said, and something changed in Victoria Whitmore's face, a shift so subtle that most people wouldn't have caught it. But Ethan was trained to read. People had spent years learning to watch for the small things beneath the controlled surface. She was grateful. Not for sympathy, for the question. For someone finally asking about Nathan, like he was a person, not a closed case. "He was stubborn," she said. "Infuriatingly stubborn. He had a laugh that was too loud for any room he was in. He had this habit of being late to everything except the things that really mattered, and for those he was always early." She paused. "He told terrible jokes, every single one, and he always laughed before he finished them." A pause that was slightly longer this time. "He believed that most people were better than they'd been given the chance to prove. It drove some people crazy. It was the thing I loved most about him." Ethan listened. He didn't say that he'd been told some of those same things about himself. Not by Victoria, by Danny, by Mia's teacher at the start of last year, by his commanding officer. He didn't say that. "He sounds like someone worth knowing," he said instead. She looked at the envelope in her hands. He was. Then she looked at Ethan. "So are you?" she said. "From what I've found, the citations, the record, the way you spoke about your daughter in the restaurant." She paused. "You didn't think I could hear you, but I was close enough. You were on the phone with your neighbor talking about picking her up. You said, 'Tell her I'll be there by 9:30. Tell her I'm sorry it's late. Tell her I love her.'" He had not known she could hear that. "She's 8, he said. "I know. I saw the school photo. You have it in your wallet. It slipped when you took out your ID at the hostess stand." He looked at her. "You researched me," he said. "Yes." "That's invasive. I know. I'm sorry." And she meant it. "It's a reflex I'm not proud of. When something matters to me, I need information. It's how I manage fear." She paused. "You matter. I'm not sure yet in what way, but you do. And that frightens me more than I can explain." Ethan sat with that for a moment. Outside the coffee shop, the morning was moving past the windows. People walking to work. A dog pulling ahead on a leash while its owner tried to catch up. The ordinary machinery of a day that had no idea what was happening inside this particular corner table. "I have a daughter who's withdrawing from her classmates," he said finally. "I have an appointment Thursday with her guidance counselor. I have a classified period of my service that I've never fully understood, and I have apparently a face that belongs to someone else's grief." He picked up the coffee again. "My life is already complicated," he said. "I know. I'm telling you that so you understand I can't take on someone else's mystery right now. Not unless it's real. Not unless it's something that actually connects to me and not just to a photograph." "Fair," she said. "But—" He set the cup down. "I think those 8 months matter, and I think you already know they do." She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "I do." "Then let's find out what's in them." That evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen table after Mia was asleep and opened the oldest folder he owned. A physical cardboard rubber band around it, shoved to the back of the filing cabinet behind his tax returns, and Mia's birth certificate, and Lauren's death certificate, and all the other official documents that mapped the shape of his life. Inside it were papers from his early service, performance reviews, transfer orders, a commendation that he'd never fully understood the context for issued from a command he'd never officially been assigned to. He pulled it out. Read it again for the first time in years. "For extraordinary service rendered in support of Operation Classified, demonstrating exceptional judgment, valor, and commitment to the protection of the rest," was redacted. He turned it over. On the back, in handwriting that was not his own, not any signature he recognized, not any name he could identify, was a single line. He had assumed for years that it was a processing note. Some administrative detail from whoever handled the commendation. He'd never looked at it closely enough to read it as anything else, but now he read it as if it was meant to be found. "Tell your daughter she comes from good people." He sat with that for a long time. Then he took out his phone. He typed a message to Victoria. "I found something. We need to talk again." The response came in less than 2 minutes. "I know. I found something too." He looked at his daughter's door. The strip of light gone dark. Now she was asleep. She was safe. She was fine. "She comes from good people." Ethan had never known what that meant. He was starting to think he was about to find out. The commendation sat on Ethan's kitchen table all night. He didn't sleep. He tried. Got into bed. Stared at the ceiling. Listened to the apartment settle around him the way old buildings do. All creaks and sighs. And then at 2 a.m. he gave up. Got up, put on a pot of coffee, and sat back down in front of that piece of paper. "Tell your daughter she comes from good people." He had received this commendation 11 years ago. He'd been 28, still relatively junior in his career, coming off a period of service that he'd been told firmly, clearly by men who did not invite follow-up questions was not something he should discuss, document, or attempt to investigate. He had been given the commendation in a private ceremony with no witnesses, no photograph, no announcement. Just a senior officer handing him a folder, shaking his hand once and saying, "You did good work, Commander," the kind that doesn't get to be public. Ethan had accepted that. He'd been young enough and disciplined enough to take it at face value, to file it away in the part of his mind marked classified, and leave it there. The Navy had taught him that some questions weren't his to ask, that the work itself was the point, not the recognition, that the best service was often the kind nobody ever knew about, But now he sat with the folder open and the handwriting on the back of the commendation under the kitchen light, and he thought about a man named Nathan Whitmore, who had disappeared during the same 8 months that Ethan couldn't fully account for in his own record. He thought about Victoria's face in the restaurant, the way the glass had slipped from her fingers, the particular quality of shock that isn't just surprise, but is something deeper, something that happens when reality cracks, and what's underneath doesn't match what you built your life on top of. At 3 in the morning, he called a number he hadn't dialed in 6 years. It rang 4 times. This better be important. The voice on the other end was gravel and irritation. In equal parts, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, retired, who had been Ethan's first real mentor in the Navy, and who maintained in retirement exactly the same energy he'd had on active duty, which was roughly that of a man who was always 2 steps ahead of everything and resented being reminded of it. "Marcus, I need to ask you about something." A long pause. The sound of movement sheets, someone sitting up. "It's 3 in the morning, son." "I know, I'm sorry." "You never call at 3 in the morning." "No." Another pause. Webb was processing. He was always processing, even half asleep, especially half asleep because the half asleep version of Marcus Webb was still sharper than most people fully awake. "This is about the 8 months. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "How did you know?" "Because it's the only thing in your file you've never asked about, which means it's the only thing you've always wanted to." He heard Webb exhale. "What happened?" "I met someone. A woman. Her late husband served during the same period. Same classification codes on both our files." Silence. Not the comfortable silence of someone thinking. The particular silence of someone deciding how much to say. "Marcus." "Who was the husband?" "Nathan Whitmore." The silence this time was longer, and when Webb spoke again, his voice had changed, not much but enough. The irritation was gone. What replaced it was something older. "Where are you?" "My kitchen." "Is your daughter home?" "She's asleep." "All right." Webb cleared his throat. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it the right way. It's not classified. The classification expired years ago. I just never had a reason to bring it up." He paused. "Nathan Whitmore didn't disappear because of an accident." Ethan sat very still. "He went dark voluntarily," Webb said. "There was an operation I was peripherally involved, not directly. It involved a network that was using Navy supply chains for things that had nothing to do with the Navy. Weapons, money, people." His voice dropped slightly. "Whitmore was embedded. Deep cover. He uncovered something that went higher than anyone expected, and when it became clear that certain people on the inside knew he'd found it, he had to make a choice fast. Go dark or get buried. He chose dark. He chose dark." Webb was quiet for a moment. The problem was, the operation had to stay buried even after it ended. Too many people in too many places. Whitmore went into protected status. New identity. The official story, the accident, the missing body, the declaration of death, that was cover. Necessary cover. Ethan's mind was moving fast now, organizing, sorting the way it did in high-pressure situations, when there was too much information coming in at once and you had to prioritize or you'd drown in it. "Was he alive?" Ethan said. "When they declared him dead, was he alive?" Webb took a long time answering. "For a while," he said finally. "Protected status doesn't always hold forever." The weight of that settled on Ethan like something physical. "When, 3 years after the declaration, an extraction went wrong." Webb's voice was careful, measured, giving him only what he was giving him. "He didn't survive it." Ethan put one hand flat on the kitchen table, grounded himself. "Victoria didn't know any of this." "No, she couldn't. The cover had to hold. She had to genuinely believe he was dead, or the people he'd exposed, the ones who were still free, still connected, would have used her." A pause. "It was the only way to keep her safe. Nathan made that choice." "Nathan made that choice." Ethan sat with it. Let it be what it was, enormous and terrible, and also in a specific way he couldn't articulate yet, an act of love so absolute, it bent the shape of everything around it. "What does this have to do with my file?" he said. "You were part of the extraction team," Webb said. "The one that failed." The kitchen went very quiet. "I don't remember that. You weren't supposed to. You were 22 years old and you followed orders, son. The operation was need to know, and you didn't need to know all of it." He paused. "You carried a man through 4 miles of hostile terrain to a pickup point in conditions that should have been impossible. What you didn't know was who the man was." Ethan's breath was slow and even and deliberate, the way he'd trained himself to breathe when the information was too large. "He didn't make it to the pickup." "No." Webb's voice was flat with the flatness of old grief. "He'd been hit before you got to him. He was too far gone by the time he held on longer than he should have been able to. Long enough to get to the point where he knew you were going to make it out." "What did he say?" Another long silence. Ethan hadn't known he was going to ask that question until it was already out of his mouth. "I don't know the exact words," Webb said. "I wasn't there. What I know is what went into the record, what the team wrote up after." He paused. "He asked your name. The team leader told him. He said, 'Tell his family he's a good man.' He said, 'If he has a daughter someday, tell her she comes from good people.'" The handwriting on the back of the commendation. The commendation issued not for something Ethan had done, not for his valor, his judgment, his service specifically, but for carrying a man named Nathan Whitmore through 4 miles of impossible terrain so that man could live long enough to choose the terms of his own ending. Nathan hadn't known Ethan had a daughter yet. Lauren had been newly pregnant when he deployed. Nathan had said someday. He had assumed. He had looked at a 22-year-old Navy man who had run 4 miles through hostile darkness carrying someone else's weight, and thought, "This one will have a daughter someday, and she'll be lucky." Ethan pressed his hand harder against the table. He wasn't going to fall apart in his kitchen at 3 in the morning. He had a daughter in the next room. He had a meeting Thursday with a guidance counselor. He had a base to report to in 5 hours. But it took him a moment. Just a moment. "Marcus," he said, "Victoria Whitmore has been grieving a lie for 17 years. I know. She thinks he just disappeared. She thinks it was an accident. I know, Ethan. She deserves to know the truth. That's above my pay grade," Webb said, quietly, not dismissively, genuinely. "That's above both our pay grades. The classification is expired, but the sensitivity isn't. The people involved, most of them, are gone. Some of them aren't. This would need to come through official channels. I don't care about official channels right now. I know you don't, but you will tomorrow." Webb's voice shifted, became the tone Ethan had learned to recognize as the mentor voice, the one that cut through emotion without dismissing it. "She waited 17 years. She can wait long enough for you to do this the right way. For her sake, not yours." Ethan breathed. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, okay. Get some sleep." "I won't. I know, but try." A pause. "Ethan, for what it's worth, what you did out there, even not knowing who he was, it mattered. He had those extra miles because of you. He had time he wouldn't have had." A beat. "That's not nothing." "No," Ethan said. "It's not." He sat at the table until the coffee went cold. Then he made another pot, watched the light change outside the kitchen window, and waited for Mia to wake up. When she padded out in her pajamas at 6:15, eyes half-closed, hair going in 3 directions, she found him already at the stove with eggs in the pan and her school bag by the door. "You're awake early," she said, climbing onto her chair. "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams?" "No. Just thinking." She accepted this the way she accepted most things, with the quiet, uncomplicated trust of a child who has learned that her father tells the truth and doesn't need to be pressed for more than he's giving. She picked up her fork. "What were you thinking about?" "Old stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." "Okay." She ate a bite of egg. Then, "Dad, do you ever think about where we come from?" He looked at her. "What do you mean? Like our family? Before us. Who were they?" She was looking at her plate the way she always did when she was working up to something she wasn't sure how to say. Emma at school did a family tree project, and she had all these pictures of her great-grandparents and her grandparents going back really far, and she knew all their names and stories. She paused. I didn't know what to say when she asked about ours. Ethan sat down across from her, put his fork down. What did you say? I said I'd ask you. She finally looked up. So I'm asking. He held her gaze. 8 years old. Smart in the way that was quiet and deep rather than loud and obvious. She had Lauren's eyes, that particular shade that changed color depending on the light gray one moment and blue the next. She had his stubbornness, though he'd never told her that. We come from good people, he said. He hadn't planned to say it. The words just came direct from the kitchen table at 3 a.m, direct from a piece of paper with handwriting he now knew belonged to a dead man who had chosen his ending with more grace than most people brought to their beginnings. Mia looked at him. Yeah. He picked his fork back up. I found some things out last night. I'll tell you more when I know more, but that's the part I already know for certain. We come from good people. She nodded, satisfied in the way that children are satisfied when the answer is simple and true, and comes from someone they trust. Okay, she said, and went back to her eggs. Ethan watched her for a moment. Then he ate too. He had work to do. He texted Victoria that morning, I have information. Some of it is significant. Can we meet today? Her response came while he was in a logistics briefing that he was physically present for and mentally entirely elsewhere. Yes, same place. 4 p.m. I'll be there. He spent the intervening hours doing what needed to be done. The briefing, 2 personnel reviews, a phone call with the base legal office about a procurement issue, and doing all of it with the particular autopilot efficiency that comes from years of learning to compartmentalize. The Navy had given him that gift early, the ability to be fully present in one thing while carrying another thing entirely in a sealed room in the back of his mind. The sealed room today was loud, but it stayed sealed. At 3:45, he drove to the coffee shop. He sat in the car for 5 minutes, first thinking through how to say what he needed to say. There were things he could tell her, and things he needed to verify could be told. Webb had said the classification was expired, but Webb was a retired warrant officer, not a JAG lawyer, and this situation deserved more than one man's assessment of what was safe to disclose. But Victoria Whitmore had spent 17 years living in a specific kind of grief, the kind built on a specific lie. And whatever the bureaucratic complications were, Ethan was not capable of sitting across from her and withholding the core of it. He went in. She was there again, before him. Same corner table. No manila envelope this time, just her both hands around a coffee cup watching the door. When she saw him come in, something in her posture shifted, a slight tightening, embracing the body language of someone who has decided to receive whatever is coming and take it standing up. He sat down. She said, You found something? Yes. Tell me. He looked at her. He thought about what Webb had said. She waited 17 years. She can wait long enough for you to do this the right way. And then he thought about the glass shattering on the marble floor, and Victoria's face in that moment, and the 17 years of a woman rebuilding her entire life on top of a story that had a different ending than the one she'd been given. Before I tell you, he said, I need you to know that what I'm going to say is going to hurt. And I also need you to know that underneath the part that hurts, there's something else. Something that I think it might actually matter to you, eventually. She held his gaze. Ethan? Yeah. I've been hurting for 17 years. I know how to do that. A pause. Tell me. So he told her. He told her what Webb had told him. Not all of it. Not the specific operational details he wasn't certain were clean to share, but the core of it. That Nathan hadn't disappeared by accident. That he'd gone dark voluntarily to protect an investigation, to protect evidence, to protect people, including her. That the declaration of death had been cover, not truth. That Nathan had been alive for 3 years after that declaration. He watched her face as he said it. She was very still. That particular stillness that isn't calm, that's the opposite of calm, That's a person holding themselves together through the sheer application of will, because the alternative is falling apart in a coffee shop, and she was Victoria Whitmore, and she did not do that. He was alive, she said. For 3 years after they declared him dead. Yes, he knew. Her voice was flat, controlled. He could hear the effort in every word. He knew what I was going through, and he couldn't contact you, Ethan said. If anyone connected to him had the people he'd exposed the network, they would have used you. To get to him. To get to the evidence. He leaned forward slightly. He went dark to protect you, Victoria, not to abandon you. Her jaw tightened. That's not your call to make, she said. Whether that's comfort or not, whether I accept that reasoning or not. Her voice cracked just slightly, just once, and then it was controlled again. He made that choice for me, without asking me. Yes, Ethan said. He did. I would have chosen differently. I know. I would have chosen the danger. I know that too. She looked at him. You know that because you would have done the same thing. He didn't answer that. She looked down at her coffee. How did he die the real way? An extraction that went wrong. He kept his voice even. She deserved evenness from him right now, not softness that might feel like pity. 3 years after the declaration, he didn't survive it. Was it fast? I don't know the full details yet. I'm working on getting them through the right channels. He paused. What I do know, what I can tell you now, is that he had time. At the end, he had enough time to say things that mattered. She looked up at that. What things? And Ethan took a breath because this was the part that had cost him most of his night. Not the facts, not the operational history. This part. I was there, he said. At the extraction. I was 22. I didn't know who he was. I just knew we had an asset to extract, and the situation had gone wrong, and I was part of the team trying to get him out. He met her eyes. I carried him. For 4 miles. I didn't know it was him. Victoria's hands went still around the coffee cup. You were there. Yes. You were the one who... She stopped. Started again. He didn't die alone. No. Ethan shook his head. He did not die alone. She closed her eyes. For 30 seconds, she didn't move. He didn't speak. Around them, the coffee shop continued its ordinary afternoon. Someone laughing at another table, the sound of the espresso machine, a child asking for something in a high, bright voice. When she opened her eyes, they were wet, but she hadn't cried. She had held it, not because she was suppressing it, he realized, but because the feeling was too large for the usual channels and was finding its own way through. What did he say? She asked. At the end? I didn't hear it directly. He said it honestly. The team leader told me afterward through the commendation. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and brought out the commendation original still in the cardboard folder, still carrying the rubber band he'd taken off last night. He slid it across the table, turned it over so she could see the handwriting on the back. Someone wrote it down. I think they wanted me to find it eventually. She looked at it. She read it. He watched her read it. Tell your daughter she comes from good people. Her hand came up to her mouth, not dramatically, not in the way that happens in movies. Just the quiet, involuntary gesture of a person receiving something they weren't braced for. He said this. The team leader wrote it in the record, in my commendation. Ethan's voice was quiet. He didn't know I'd have a daughter. I didn't even know yet my wife was newly pregnant when I deployed. He just assumed. He looked at a 22-year-old Navy man and assumed. He paused. That's the kind of person he was. Victoria's hand was still at her mouth. She was looking at the handwriting like it was in a language she was learning to read. Like it was both foreign and entirely familiar, which he thought it was. It was Nathan's assumption, Nathan's generosity, Nathan's incorrigible faith in other people written in someone else's hand on the back of a piece of paper that had sat in a filing cabinet for 11 years. He saw you, she said. Even at the end. He saw you and he thought... She stopped. Yeah, Ethan said. She carefully slowly set the commendation back on the table between them. She didn't push it back toward him. She left it in the middle, equidistant like it belonged to both of them. I've spent 17 years being angry at him, she said. At the accident, at whatever took him, at the randomness of it. She exhaled slowly. It wasn't random. No. He made choices. Every step of the way he made choices. She looked at the commendation. And the last one was about making sure a 22-year-old Navy man who carried him through the dark knew his family was worth something. That's one way to read it. Is there another way? He thought about it honestly. He was protecting you. All his choices going dark, the cover not reaching out, they were about keeping you safe. And at the very end, when there was nothing left he could do for the people he loved directly, he redirected it. He put it somewhere it might land. Ethan paused. It landed. She looked at him for a long time. You told your daughter this morning, she said. It wasn't a question. He blinked. How? Because you said eventually it might matter to you when you came in. But it had already mattered to you. You had a conversation about it that you're still carrying. She tilted her head slightly. What did she ask? Where we come from. And you told her. I told her we come from good people. He paused. It was the first true thing I've ever been able to tell her about our history that I actually had a source for. Victoria's expression did something complicated. Several things moving across it at once. Grief and wonder, and the particular devastation of realizing that a loss you'd carried for years had been doing things in the world without your knowing. Nathan had saved Ethan. Ethan had a daughter. Ethan's daughter now knew something about who she came from. It was not what Victoria had lost coming back. It was what Nathan had done with his ending spreading outward into other people's lives in ways he'd never know about. I want to meet her, Victoria said. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Mia, Victoria clarified. Not today, not soon necessarily. I'm not asking to insert myself into your life, Ethan. I just want you to know that she matters to me already. Because she mattered to him already somehow before she even existed. A pause. He had faith in a future she'd be part of. That means something. It does, Ethan said. I need some time, she said. With this, with all of it. She looked at the commendation one more time, then pushed it gently back toward him. You should keep this. It's yours. It's also yours. I know. She looked at him. Keep it. And when the time is right, when you've gone through the right channels, when there's more of the story than we have right now, tell me the rest. I will. All of it. Even the parts that are hard. Especially those. She nodded, picked up her coffee. It had gone cold while they were talking. She didn't seem to notice or mind. She drank it anyway, which told him something about her. About how she operated under pressure. About the specifics of how she was made. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. The Thursday table, at the restaurant. You go every week. She was quiet for a moment. We had a standing reservation. The last Thursday of every month, that specific table, 7 o'clock. We'd been doing it since before we were married. She paused. When he disappeared, I kept going. It seemed important to keep going. Like if I stopped, something final happened that I wasn't ready for. A long pause. I never stopped. Ethan absorbed that. 17 years. Every Thursday. You were keeping a place for him, he said. I suppose I was. She set the coffee down. And then one Thursday, a Navy officer sat down at his table and looked up at me with his face, and She exhaled. I think I was keeping it for you, actually. I just didn't know it yet. The thing about Victoria Whitmore Ethan was learning was that she was deeply honest in ways that cost her something. She didn't make herself easier to digest. She said what was true and let it sit there, occupying the space it needed to occupy. He respected that more than almost anything else. I should go, he said. I need to pick up Mia by 5:30. Of course. She stood when he did, equal not deferential. She was shorter than he'd registered at the restaurant. Or maybe it was just that the grief had taken something temporary from her height, and she'd be different tomorrow. Victoria. He picked up the commendation, put it back in his pocket. He loved you enough to give you back to your life. To protect your future, even when it meant not being in it. He paused. I know that doesn't fix the 17 years. Nothing fixes that. But I want you to know that from where I'm standing from the outside, with the information I have, there was never a moment that man stopped thinking about you. She looked at him with an expression he didn't have a word for yet. Thank you, she said finally, for telling me. For going through Marcus Webb at 3 in the morning instead of waiting. A slight pause. And for carrying him, even not knowing who he was, even without the full picture. He deserved to get out, Ethan said simply. Yes. Her voice was quiet. He did. He left her standing by the corner table. He walked back to his car, sat in it for a moment, with his hands on the wheel, and thought about a 22-year-old version of himself running through the dark with someone else's weight on his shoulders, not knowing who it was, not needing to know, just knowing it was a person and people deserved to make it out. He started the engine. He had a daughter to pick up. He had a guidance counselor appointment on Thursday. He had official channels to navigate a record to request a complete picture to assemble for a woman who had earned the right to the whole truth. He had work to do, but underneath all of that, underneath the logistics and the responsibility and the managed efficiency of a life structured against collapse, something had shifted. Something that had been sealed for 11 years, sealed under rubber bands and filing cabinet drawers, and the particular discipline of a man who had learned not to ask questions that didn't have answers yet. Nathan Whitmore had seen something in a 22-year-old Navy man and decided it was worth something. Ethan Calloway had spent 17 years becoming the thing Nathan had already believed he was. Maybe that wasn't a coincidence. Maybe that was something else entirely. He pulled out of the parking lot. Behind him, through the coffee shop window, Victoria Whitmore sat back down at the corner table. She picked up her cold coffee. She looked at the empty chair across from her. And for the first time in 17 years, she didn't see an absence there. She saw a door. Thursday came the way hard days always come, unremarkably without warning, pretending to be an ordinary morning, until it wasn't anymore. Ethan dropped Mia at school at 7:45, watched her walk through the front doors without looking back the way she used to when she was smaller, and needed the reassurance of seeing him still standing there, and felt the particular ache of a father watching his child learn to need him less. It was supposed to be a good thing. He knew it was supposed to be a good thing. It didn't always feel like one. He reported to base. He handled what needed handling. At 11:30, he submitted a formal request through the base legal office for declassified records pertaining to operation. He had finally found the name buried in a footnote of the commendation paperwork, Operation Iron Veil. The JAG officer who processed the request was a young lieutenant named Chen, who looked at the classification codes, looked at the expiration date, looked at Ethan's rank, and said, "This might take a few weeks, sir." How few? 3 to 5 business days if there are no complications. The codes are expired. It should be routine. She paused. Should be? What would complicate it? If any of the associated personnel are still active in sensitive capacities. She held his gaze with a professional neutrality that told him she understood more than she was saying. I'll flag it as a priority and let you know. Thank you, Lieutenant. He made it to Mia's school by 1 o'clock for the guidance counselor meeting. The counselor's name was Patricia Hale, mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, the kind of steady warmth that comes from spending 20 years in rooms with children, and learning that patience is not passive, it's an active choice you make every single moment. She shook his hand, gestured to the chair across from her desk, waited until he was settled before she started, which he appreciated. Thank you for coming in, Commander Calloway, she said. I want to start by being clear. Mia is not in trouble. She's one of the most considerate students in her class. Her teachers all genuinely enjoy her. But she's been quieter, more internal. She completes everything: homework, projects, class participation when called on, but she doesn't volunteer. She doesn't initiate with the other kids. During free time, she usually finds a book or sits near the window. Mrs. Hale folded her hands. I've talked with her a little gently. She's not unhappy. She's not being bullied or excluded. She's just choosing to be alone. Ethan leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. She mentioned something last week. A classmate did a family history project. It upset her, not visibly, but it bothered her. Emma's project, yes. Mrs. Hale nodded slowly. That might be part of it. Mia has a strong inner life commander. She processes things deeply and quietly, which is a genuine gift, but it also means she carries things without showing them. A pause. Has she talked to you about her mother? Not recently. She was 3 when Lauren died. Her memories are more feeling than fact. She knows what happened. We've talked about it in age-appropriate ways as she's grown. He paused. Is that what this is about? Her mom? Partly, I think. But I also think it's about you. She said it carefully, without accusation. Mia loves you enormously. It's evident in everything she does and says. But I think she worries about you. She mentioned that you don't sleep well sometimes, that you eat leftovers alone after she goes to bed. Mrs. Hale's voice was gentle. She said, My dad carries everything by himself, and I don't know how to help him. Ethan sat back. He didn't say anything for a moment because the thing in his chest that was opening up needed a second to do that without an audience. She said that. She did, word for word. He pressed his hands together, breathed. She's 8 years old. Yes, she is. And she's spending some of her 8-year-old energy trying to figure out how not to add to what you're carrying. Mrs. Hale's voice didn't soften further. It stayed level because level was what this required. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I think the thing Mia needs most right now isn't a program or an intervention. I think she needs to see her father let someone help him, even once, even a little. He looked at the wall above her desk. A child's drawing framed a house with a too big sun and stick figures. The way every child draws a house, the way every child draws a family. I've been working on that, he said. It came out quieter than he intended. I believe you. She paused. Is there anything new? Anything that's shifting for you lately? He thought about Victoria's face in the restaurant. He thought about a phone call at 3 a.m. and handwriting on the back of a commendation, and a woman who had kept a restaurant reservation for 17 years. He thought about the specific way the sealed room in the back of his mind had been getting louder. There might be, he said. It's complicated. Things that matter usually are. She looked at him over her glasses. Mia doesn't need you to be perfect, Commander. She needs you to be present. And sometimes being present means letting her see that you're going through something too, not the details, just that it's happening and that it's okay, and that you're going to be all right. He nodded, slowly. Okay, he said. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. She stood. Bring her in to see me sometime, not because she's in trouble, just to talk. She likes talking to adults who take her seriously. Most kids do. He drove back to base thinking about his daughter sitting by a window with a book while the other kids ran around her. Not because she was unhappy, but because at 8 years old, she had already quietly decided that her interior life was the safest place she knew. He thought I made her that way. Partly. By teaching her without meaning to, that the people she loved carried their weight alone and didn't ask for help. He thought I have to change that. He didn't know yet exactly how. But knowing was the first step, and he had learned long ago that the first step mattered more than any other, because without it, none of the rest happened. He was still thinking about it when his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Are you free tonight? There's something I need to show you. Not a message this time, an actual document. Nathan's. I found it. He stared at the text for a long moment at a red light. Then he texted back, I'll need to arrange childcare. Give me an hour. He called Mrs. Patterson, who said yes without asking why, because Mrs. Patterson had been saying yes without asking why for 3 years, and was in Ethan's private estimation one of the finest human beings currently living. He picked Mia up at 3:15, took her to Mrs. Patterson's apartment, made sure she had her homework and her book and the specific snack she needed, or the evening would go sideways in a very particular Mia way, and then crouched down at the door to look at her at eye level. "I have something I need to do tonight," he said. "Okay," she said. "It's important." She studied him the way she did when she was deciding how to read him that particular solemn assessment that made her look sometimes startlingly older than 8. "Is it the thing you were thinking about the other morning? The complicated thing?" Yeah, it is." "Are you okay?" "I am," he said. "And I'm going to be more okay after tonight, I think." She nodded, satisfied. Then she reached up and put her small hand on the side of his face, the same gesture he realized with a jolt that she'd made when she was 3 and he was falling apart on the night Lauren died, and said, "We come from good people." He almost didn't hold it together. "We do," he said. "We really do." She dropped her hand and went inside, already reaching into her bag for the book, already in her own world. He stood in the doorway for a second longer than necessary. Then he turned and walked back to his car and drove to Victoria Whitmore's house for the first time, and tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming next. Her house was not what he expected. Not a mansion, not a compound, a large, but not ostentatious home on a quiet street, the kind of place that said substantial rather than performative. She opened the door herself. No staff, no assistant. She was in different clothes than he'd seen her in before, casual, the kind of careful casual that cost money but was trying not to show it. Her hair was down. She looked more vulnerable this way, more real. He suspected she knew that. "Come in," she said. He followed her through a hallway into what was clearly the room she actually lived in. Not the formal spaces he could see off the entrance, but a large room with a real couch and bookshelves that had been actually used, and a fireplace that had burn marks that told you it was lit regularly. There was a coffee table with a laptop and a stack of manila folders and 2 mugs already waiting. She sat. He sat across from her. She pushed one of the mugs toward him without asking. Black 2 sugars, same as the coffee shop. He noticed she was keeping track of these small things. He wasn't sure what to do with that. "I got a call yesterday," she said, "from a man named Philip Cross. He was Nathan's direct handler for most of his undercover work. He's 81 years old, retired for over a decade, and he tracked me down because—" She paused, "because he heard I'd been making inquiries. Apparently, even in retirement, that network hears things." She looked at the folders. "He told me things that Marcus Webb couldn't tell you. Things that weren't in the official record because Nathan asked specifically that they not be documented." Ethan set his mug down. "What kind of things?" "The kind a man says when he knows he's running out of time to say them." She opened the top folder. Inside was a single printed sheet, a transcript. He could see the formatting. Cross recorded their last conversation. Nathan didn't know he was recording it. Cross said he did it because he knew Nathan was about to go on the extraction, and the odds weren't good, and he said he wanted there to be a record that was human, not operational, just human. She looked at the sheet. "He gave me a copy." Ethan looked at the transcript in her hands. "Victoria." He said her name carefully. "Before you read that, or show me that, I want to ask you something." "Ask." "Are you sure you want to do this tonight? You could take more time, process what we already know before." "I've been processing for 17 years, she said, not harshly, just clearly. "I don't need more time. I need the truth." She looked at him. "And I think I need someone here when I read it. I don't have—" She stopped, started again. "I don't have many people. I made my world very small after Nathan, by choice. I built the company and I kept my circle tight because a tight circle meant limited exposure, and limited exposure meant limited pain." She held his gaze. "You're one of the few people I've talked to in a long time who actually listens instead of just waiting for their turn to speak." He absorbed that. "Okay," he said. "I'm here." She looked at the transcript. She began to read aloud. Her voice was steady, not the steadiness of someone who isn't feeling it, but the steadiness of someone who has made a decision to feel it, without letting it knock her down. Cross had asked Nathan near the end of that last conversation, "Is there anything you want me to tell her, if things go wrong?" Nathan had been quiet for a long moment. Then he'd said, "Don't tell her I'm sorry. She'll hear that as an apology, and it isn't one. I made choices. They were the right choices. She'd have made the same ones." Cross had said she might argue that. Nathan had said, "That's because she's stubborn. It's the best thing about her. Tell her. Tell her that the company she built is what I would have built too if I'd been the one who was left. Tell her she took everything we talked about in the beginning, all our stupid late-night plans, and she made them real. I watched what I could when I could. From a distance. I watched it happen." A pause. "Tell her that I watched." Victoria's voice when she read that part dropped to almost nothing. She stopped. She looked up at Ethan. He didn't say anything. He just held the eye contact. She looked back down. Cross had asked, "Is there anyone else?" Nathan had said, "There's a kid on the extraction team. Young, Navy. I don't know his name yet, but I'll meet him soon enough. Whatever happens, make sure he knows his family is worth something. Make sure it gets to him somehow." A beat. He's running toward a situation that most people would run away from. That tells you who he is. That tells you everything. Victoria stopped reading again. She set the transcript down very carefully on the coffee table, the way you set down something breakable, and pressed both hands flat on top of it. Ethan realized in the silence that his own breathing had changed. Nathan Whitmore had said, "I'll meet him soon enough." He'd known the extraction was coming. He'd known there was a young Navy man on the team. He'd planned even in those final hours, even knowing the odds, he'd planned what he wanted to leave behind. "He knew about you before he met you," Victoria said. "He didn't know my name." "No, but he knew you." She looked at the transcript. "He said that tells you who he is. Past tense. He'd already decided." A pause. Nathan made decisions about people very fast and very rarely changed them. It drove his handlers crazy. But he was almost always right. Almost? She looked up. Once, he decided an asset was trustworthy who wasn't. It nearly cost him everything. A slight pause. That was 2 years before he disappeared. After that, he trusted himself even more, not less. He said the one mistake taught him what to look for. What did it teach him? That people who perform goodness are usually working from a script, but people who just are, who are decent, without thinking about whether anyone's watching, those people don't perform. They just act. She looked at Ethan. Running toward a situation that most people run away from, without knowing why, without knowing who was in it. She tilted her head. That's what he saw in you. Ethan sat back. He was quiet for a moment, turning it over, trying to look at it honestly, rather than through the distorting lens of wanting it to mean what it seemed to mean. I was following orders. It was my assignment. You were following orders right up to the moment the situation went beyond orders, Victoria said. Cross told me that too. The extraction point was compromised. The team leader called a retreat. 2 other members of the team fell back. She held his gaze. You didn't. He went still. He remembered that. He'd tried over the years not to remember it, not because it was traumatic, but because it was the kind of memory that made you feel things about yourself that were uncomfortable to sit with. The kind of thing that if you told people about it, sounded like you were making yourself a hero, and that wasn't the point. The point had just been that there was still someone out there, and retreating felt impossible. It wasn't heroism, he said. It was just I couldn't leave someone. I know, Victoria said. That's what Nathan saw. That's exactly what Nathan saw. She picked up the transcript again, read the last part. Cross had asked one more thing near the end. If she ever finds out if any of this ever comes out years from now, what do you want her to know? Nathan had said without hesitation. Tell her not to search for my face in another person. I know her. She'll want to. She'll look for pieces of me in someone who makes her feel something. Tell her that's not what love is. A pause longer this time. Tell her search for the heart that made you love me. Not the face. Not the memories. The thing underneath all of that. Find someone who has that same thing. She'll know it when she sees it. She just can't let herself make it about me. Victoria set the transcript down again. The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere distant, a car passed. The fireplace, unlit tonight, but present its history of warmth still in the walls, seemed to settle slightly, one of those small sounds that old structures make. Victoria's eyes were wet. She wasn't trying to hide it, and she wasn't performing it. She was just sitting with it the way she sat, with everything upright, present, taking the full weight. "He knew me so well," she said. "It's almost aggravating." Ethan heard the grief in it, and also the love, and the love was stronger, and that was the remarkable thing. "Have you been doing it?" he said carefully, searching for his face. She looked at him directly. "When I saw you in the restaurant," she said. "Yes, that's what I was doing. Involuntarily, instinctively, yes." A beat. "But that's not what's happening now. I want you to know that. Whatever this is, what we've been doing these past days, talking, finding things that's not me, looking for Nathan in you. You're not Nathan. I know you're not Nathan. But he was right that I'd know it when I saw it." She held his gaze steadily. "Whatever it is in you that made a 22-year-old Navy man refuse to fall back when there was still someone out there that's still in you. I can see it. It's in how you talk about your daughter. It's in the fact that you called Marcus Webb at 3 a.m. because you couldn't hold the information one more day without doing something useful with it." She paused. "It's in the way you sat here tonight and let me read that aloud without trying to make it easier, because you knew I needed it to be real, not softened." Ethan looked at his hands. He was trying to hold the conversation carefully. It mattered in ways that required precision. "Victoria," he said, "I need to be honest with you about something." "Please." "I like you," he said. "I didn't expect to. I came into this situation with a clear sense of what it was, a strange coincidence, a grieving woman, a chapter of my own history I didn't know. I was going to handle it the way I handle things, methodically, at a distance." He paused. "But you're not a situation I can manage at a distance. You're a real person and you're remarkable, and I'm aware that I'm starting to look forward to these conversations in a way that's different from how I look forward to most things." She held very still. "That's the honest thing," she said. "Half of it." He looked at her. "The other half is that I don't know what to do with that. I have a daughter who already carries more than she should. I have a career that demands everything I have and then asks for more. I have a chapter of my life that's just now coming clear after 11 years of being sealed away, and I don't know yet what it means for who I am." He exhaled. "And you are Victoria Whitmore, which comes with approximately 9,000 complications I'm not sure I'm equipped for." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know what I've been doing for 17 years while I built that company?" "Working. Controlling," she corrected. "Every variable I could reach. The company, the deals, the terms. My schedule, my environment, my exposure. I made myself very good at managing things from a position of strength." A pause. "What I cannot do, what I have never been good at, is sitting with something I can't control and just letting it be what it is." "And what is this?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But I think it's the first thing in a very long time that I haven't tried to manage." She held his gaze. "And I think that might be Nathan's point, actually. The one at the end. Stop searching for what you already know. Let something new be what it is." The thing about conversations that matter, Ethan had found, is that they reach a point where the next move is either toward or away, and both directions are permanent in their own way. The choice to move toward something is a commitment. The choice to move away is also a commitment. There is no neutral ground that keeps everything the same. He had spent 3 years since Lauren died in a very effective approximation of neutral ground. Managing, containing, getting through each day with his daughter intact and his career intact, and his grief, somewhere, it wasn't causing problems. It had worked. He was alive. Mia was alive. They had built something that functioned. But Mrs. Hale's voice was in his head. Mia needs to see her father let someone help him, even once. Even a little. I want to keep talking, he said finally. About all of it. The records when they come in. Nathan's full story as it becomes clear. And the other part too. Whatever the other part is. He paused. But I need it to be slow. Not because I don't trust you. Because I have an 8-year-old who has already experienced loss in a way that has shaped how she moves through the world, and before anything changes in her world, she needs to feel the ground is solid. That's not slow, Victoria said. That's responsible. Sometimes they feel the same from the inside. I know. She almost smiled. It was the first time he'd seen something close to a smile on her, not the professional one, not the composed public face, but something smaller and more tentative and entirely real. I can do slow. I've been doing everything else at speed for 17 years. Slow might be a relief. He stood. She stood. She walked him to the door. At the threshold she stopped and he stopped, and there was a moment of not awkwardness but recognition. The specific recognition of two people who are aware something has shifted and are both deciding whether to acknowledge it. He held out his hand. She looked at it. Then she took it, not a professional shake, but a hold. Brief. Both hands briefly before she let go. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for the transcript, he said. For reading it out loud. For doing it the real way instead of the managed way. Nathan would have approved of the irony, she said. Me finally doing something the uncontrolled way. Maybe that's part of what he was hoping for. She looked at him. Maybe it is. He drove home through quiet streets, Mia safely retrieved from Mrs. Patterson's and asleep in her car seat by the time they pulled into the lot. He carried her up the stairs, tucked her in, stayed a moment in the dark. He thought about Nathan Whitmore running out of time and choosing very precisely what to spend the last of it on. Not regret, not appeals, not even goodbye. Just forward-pointing things, a transcript for a handler who would someday give it to the right person. A message for a Navy man who would someday have a daughter. A final instruction to the woman he loved. Don't look for my face. Find the heart. It was the most competent goodbye Ethan had ever encountered. He went to bed at 10 o'clock for the first time in months. He didn't sleep immediately. He lay in the dark and listened to the apartment and thought about slow and responsible, and the way Victoria Whitmore almost smiled, and the way that almost felt like more than most people's full thing. But eventually, for the first time in a long time, he slept. He slept without waking up at 2, with the volume on the sealed room turned all the way up. The sealed room was open now. Whatever had been inside it was out, and the air in there was the same as the air everywhere else. And that turned out to be easier to breathe. 4 days later, Lieutenant Chen called. The records request went through Commander. Faster than expected, someone in the declassification office flagged it as overdue, apparently. The associated personnel have all separated from service or deceased. A brief pause. I have the full file ready for you. It's substantial. How substantial? 87 pages. 14 of them are still partially redacted for third-party privacy, but the operational narrative is complete. Another pause. Sir, I read some of it in the processing. I want to say what you did out there. The record is very clear. Thank you, Lieutenant. The man you carried. The file identifies him. You'll see it when you read it. I know who he was, Ethan said. A silence on the line. Then you know why the commendation was the way it was. Yeah? He paused. I do now. He picked up the file that afternoon, drove to a quiet parking lot and sat in his car and read all 87 pages in one sitting. The light outside changed while he read, afternoon moving toward evening. Moving toward the specific blue-gray of early dark that made the world look like it was holding its breath. The file confirmed everything Webb had said. It filled in the gaps, gave names to the nameless parts, put faces to the operational abstractions. It gave him a clear picture of an 11-year operation that had taken down a network operating inside 3 different branches of government, and of the man at the center of it who had spent years working alone in the dark on behalf of people who would never know he existed. And at the end, in the operational log of the failed extraction, it gave him this: Asset Whitmore N. remained conscious for approximately 40 minutes post-injury during evacuation. Asset was engaged by support personnel, Callaway E throughout. Asset's final communication logged by team leader at 0347 hours. Tell the young one this is what it's supposed to feel like. Doing the right thing in the dark. It's supposed to feel exactly like this. Ethan read it twice. Then he sat very still and let it be what it was. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Doing the right thing in the dark. He had spent 11 years not knowing that sentence was in a file with his name on it. He had spent 11 years doing the right thing in the dark anyway. Maybe that was Nathan's point too. Not that the message would shape him, but that it would confirm what was already true. That someday when he finally read it, he would recognize it not as instruction, but as description. As someone who had seen him clearly and said yes exactly, that keep going. He called Victoria. She answered on the second ring. The file came in, he said, a breath on the other end. And, it's all there, everything. He paused. I want to bring it to you, but I want to tell you something first over the phone before I do. Tell me. His last logged words, in the operational file. Ethan looked out the windshield at the early dark at the ordinary street going about its ordinary evening. He said, this is what it's supposed to feel like, doing the right thing in the dark. It's supposed to feel exactly like this. The silence on Victoria's end was different from her other silences. Deeper, the kind that has texture. That's Nathan, she said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. That is completely Nathan. I thought so. He would have been even then, even in that moment, he would have been thinking about it like a lesson. Like something worth passing on. A breath that was close to a laugh but different from it, grief shaped like laughter, the specific sound of loving someone difficult and wonderful. He was absolutely insufferable sometimes. He sounds like it. In the best possible way. She was quiet for a moment. Bring me the file, Ethan. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'll put the kettle on. He started the car. The street ahead was dark and ordinary and his. He drove toward the light in her window and thought about what it meant to do the right thing in the dark, not because someone was watching, not because the record would reflect it, not because there was a commendation waiting at the end of it, just because there was someone out there who needed carrying and you had the strength to do it and you went. He thought Nathan Whitmore had understood something most people didn't. That the moments nobody sees, the 3 a.m. phone calls, the 4 miles through hostile dark. The guided counselor appointments, the leftovers over the sink after your daughter is asleep. The years of keeping everything running by sheer force of love and will, and the refusal to let it fall apart. Those moments are not the price you pay for the meaningful ones. Those moments are the meaningful ones. He pulled onto Victoria Street. The light was on. He parked and walked to the door and knocked and waited, and when she opened it, she had 2 mugs already in her hands, and her eyes were clear and ready, and she said, "Come in." And he came in, and the file was in his hand, and the whole truth was finally in the same room as the person who had earned it. They sat at her kitchen table for 4 hours that night. Not the formal living room, with the curated bookshelves and the fireplace. The kitchen, her actual kitchen, with the coffee rings on the table, and the stack of mail she hadn't dealt with, and the notepad by the stove, where she'd written a grocery list in the margin of a meeting agenda. The kitchen that told you how someone actually lived when they weren't performing the version of themselves the world expected. Ethan put the file on the table between them. Victoria looked at it the way you look at something you've been waiting for so long that now it's here. The waiting feels safer than the opening. You don't have to read it tonight, he said. I know. She put her hand on the cover. Didn't open it. Tell me the parts that mattered most. In your words, then I'll read it. So he did. He told her about the network, what it was, what it had been doing inside the government's supply chains, how deep it had gone. He told her about Nathan's embedded role, the years of careful, precise, dangerous work. He told her about the moment the cover nearly broke, and the decision Nathan had made in the space of about 4 hours to go dark or get killed, and why the people running the operation had agreed it was the only viable option. He told her about the 3 years, the years Nathan had been alive after the declaration of death. The years he'd spent in protected status, in a life that was technically his, but practically a shell. Different name, different location, limited contact with anyone who knew him before. He'd been monitored. He'd been safe as much as anyone in that situation is safe. He'd watched from a distance the way Webb had said. He'd seen Whitmore Technologies grow from a grief project into something real. Victoria listened to all of it without interrupting. She was holding her coffee mug with both hands, not drinking it, just holding it. Her face was doing the thing he'd come to recognize, the controlled surface, with the deep current moving underneath, visible only in the small things. The way her jaw set slightly. The way her breathing was deliberate. When he finished, she said, "He saw the company." "Yes." He watched it happen, like he said in the transcript, as much as the protected status allowed. Which wasn't unlimited, but yes, he knew what you were building. She looked at the wall for a moment. "I named the first product line after a place we went on our 3rd date. I thought it was my private joke, my way of keeping him in it." A pause. He would have known. He would have known exactly. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were clear, not because she wasn't feeling it, but because she'd decided what to do with the feeling. He'd seen her make that decision several times now. It was one of the things he found most remarkable about her, not the absence of emotion, but the active, deliberate choice about what to do with it. "The extraction," she said. "Walk me through it, the way it actually happened." "Victoria, I need the real version." She held his gaze. "Not the version that protects me, the actual one." He walked her through it. The compromised pickup point. The call to retreat. The 2 team members who fell back, not cowardly, strategically following protocol. The decision Ethan had made, which at the time hadn't felt like a decision at all, just a thing his body did before his brain fully caught up. "I heard him before I saw him," Ethan said. "He was trying to move under his own power. He'd been hit. I didn't know how bad yet. I just knew someone was still out there and the pickup was compromised, but not impossible, just harder." "You went back." "I went forward. I hadn't fully retreated yet." He paused. "That distinction mattered to me at the time. I didn't go back. I just didn't go." She looked at him. Nathan would have liked that distinction. He was calmer than you'd expect, Ethan said. For someone in his condition, he didn't panic. He told me once to watch my left side, which I did, and that saved me from something I would have walked straight into. He paused. He was still working. Even then, still thinking about the people around him. Victoria's hand tightened on the mug. "That's him," she said quietly. "And when I got him to cover, and it became clear we were going to have to wait for a new extraction window, we talked." Ethan said it carefully because this part he hadn't told her yet. "He didn't know who I was in any specific way, but he talked." She looked up sharply. "What did he say?" Ethan thought about how to give it to her honestly, without making it into something it wasn't. It had been a strange conversation, the specific intimacy of 2 strangers in an impossible situation, the way extreme circumstances stripped away everything social and left only the real. "He talked about a woman," Ethan said. "He didn't use her name. He just said, 'There's someone.' He said she was stubborn and brilliant, and that she didn't know her own strength yet, but she would." He paused. "He said she was going to build something that mattered. He said he knew it the way he knew other things, the way he knew when an operation was going to work or wasn't, just certain." Victoria was absolutely still. "He was talking about me," she said. "He was talking about you." Ethan met her eyes. He said, "She's going to be fine. I need her to know that eventually, that she was always going to be fine." He said it like a fact, like it had already happened. The sound Victoria made was not quite a cry. It was something underneath crying, the thing that happens when the grief that's been sitting in the chest for 17 years finally gets enough information to make sense of itself. Not release exactly. More like recognition. She pressed one hand to her mouth. He let it be what it was. He didn't reach across the table to fix it. He didn't fill the silence with words. He had learned from years of being the person on the other end of hard news, from years of sitting with people in the moment when something large became real, that the most useful thing you can do sometimes is simply stay. Witness it. Don't manage it. Don't redirect it. Be in the room with it. After a long moment, she lowered her hand, breathed, straightened slightly, that characteristic movement, the spine that never fully let go. "Okay," she said. "Yeah. He was right, wasn't he?" It wasn't a question. "I was fine. I am fine. You built something that mattered." "I did." She looked at the file. "Not the way I would have chosen. Not without the cost." She paused. "But yes, I did." She opened the file. She read slowly. Ethan stayed at the table, got up once to refill both their mugs without being asked, came back and sat down. She didn't ask him to explain things. She read in silence for nearly an hour, turning pages carefully, going back occasionally to reread something. At one point she stopped and looked up at him. Page 43. He turned to it. In his own memory, he had nearly memorized the file in that parking lot. Page 43 was the section about the decision to maintain the cover after the extraction window passed. The decision to extend Nathan's protected status rather than attempt to extract him again immediately. "He agreed to it," Victoria said. "It wasn't forced. He agreed to stay in." "Yes, because the network still had active members who hadn't been identified yet." She looked at the page. "He stayed in to protect the investigation." "Another 8 months." She turned the page. Found the part he knew she was looking for. The final extraction attempt. The decision to move the compromised situation the 4 miles in the dark. She read it all the way through. Set that page down differently from the others, more carefully, almost gently. "He said your name," she said. "In the log, the team leader's account." She looked at Ethan. "He asked your name and then he said it back to himself, like he was learning it." "Yeah. He wanted to know who you were. He wanted to know who was with him." "No." She shook her head slowly. "He wanted to know who you were. There's a difference. Nathan always needed to know who the people around him were. Not their rank or their role, who they actually were." She looked at the page again. "He learned your name, and then he said what he said to the team leader, and then he stopped." A pause. "The log says asset became unresponsive at 04:01 hours. "Yes." She closed the file. She put both hands flat on the cover and sat with them there. 14 minutes, she said. "Between when the team leader logged your name and when Nathan—" She stopped, recalibrated. "He had 14 minutes after he knew who you were. He used them the way he used everything," Ethan said, "to do something that mattered." Victoria looked at her hands on the file. Then she looked at Ethan with an expression he couldn't fully catalog: grief and gratitude, and something that was still too new and tender to have a name. "Thank you," she said, "for being the kind of person he could see in 14 minutes. Because he was very good at seeing, and what he saw made him—" Her voice dropped, "made him peaceful. The log says that. Asset appeared calm. Asset's final communications were deliberate and controlled. He wasn't afraid." "No," Ethan said. "He wasn't afraid. Because he knew you were going to make it out. Because he'd done what he came to do," Ethan said carefully. "All of it. The operation, the investigation, the 14 minutes. He paused. "He was done, Victoria. In the best sense. Finished. Complete." She nodded slowly. "I can live with that," she said, and it was the kind of statement that holds years of weight in a handful of words, not easy, not resolved, but true. A thing she had decided. "I couldn't live with the accident." with the random terrible meaninglessness of it. But this I can hold. She straightened. He made choices. He was good at making choices. He chose well all the way to the end. They sat in the kitchen for a while longer without talking, which was its own kind of conversation, comfortable in the way that only happens between people who have been through something significant together and don't need to narrate it. At some point, Ethan looked at his watch. It was past 11. "I should go," he said. "I know." She didn't move to hurry him. "Ethan." "Yeah, I want to meet Mia." She said it plainly, no performance in it. Not to be anything specific to her, not to step into anything. Just she's part of this story. Nathan thought about her before she existed. I think she deserves to know that someday. A pause. When you think it's right. When she's ready. On your terms. He thought about his daughter patting his face in the dark. About her sitting by the window with her book while the other kids ran past. About we come from good people landing on her 8-year-old face with the weight of something she'd needed without knowing she needed it. "Let me think about how," he said. "Not whether. How. That's all I'm asking." He stood. She walked him to the door again. The same threshold as 3 nights before, but different. They were different. Or maybe they were more themselves than they'd been 3 nights ago. And that was the same thing. He turned at the door. "Victoria, what Nathan built the investigation, the network he took down the years in the dark, doing the thing nobody could see." He paused, finding it. "You built the visible version of the same thing. You took everything he believed in, and you made it something people could see and touch. You did that while thinking it was just grief work, just survival." He held her gaze. It wasn't. It was the other half of what he started. You finished it. She stood very still. "I hadn't thought of it that way," she said. "He would have." She was quiet for a moment. "Yes, he would have." A pause. "That's either a comforting thought or an overwhelming one." "Can be both." "Yes." Something moved across her face, that almost smile he'd seen before, closer this time to an actual one. "It can." He walked to his car, drove home, checked on Mia. A sleep blanket half kicked off the way it always was by 11, her book on the nightstand with a bookmark in it. He tucked the blanket back, stood there for a moment. He thought everything is different now and nothing has changed, and somehow both of those things are true at the same time. He went to bed. He slept. The following 2 weeks moved in the way that important periods of life sometimes move, both faster and slower than normal time, marked by small things that felt significant and large things that somehow felt manageable. He told Danny, not everything the classified details he kept where they belonged, but the shape of it. The restaurant Victoria, the commendation, the file, the 14 minutes. Danny listened the way he always listened. When Ethan finished, Danny was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "You carried him 4 miles. Yeah. You've been carrying people your whole life, and you didn't even know that was one of them." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. "How do you feel?" Danny said. "About the whole thing?" "Differently every hour," Ethan said honestly. "Sometimes it feels like something lifted. Sometimes it feels like I picked something up. Sometimes both." "What about Victoria?" Ethan paused. "I don't know yet." "That's not a no." "No," he said. "It's not a no." Danny nodded slowly. "She sounds like someone worth the complicated." "She is." No hesitation on that one. "She definitely is." The guidance counselor meeting, the follow-up one he'd scheduled at Mrs. Hale's suggestion, happened on a Tuesday. He brought Mia this time. Mrs. Hale had suggested it, and Mia had said with the directness she applied to most things, "Is it because I'm quiet at school?" "Partly," he said. "But also because Mrs. Hale thinks you're interesting and wants to talk to you more." "That's probably true," Mia said without a trace of arrogance, just the matter-of-fact self-assessment of a child who has been told honestly what she's like and has decided to believe it. Mrs. Hale talked to Mia for 20 minutes, while Ethan sat in the waiting area outside. When they came out, Mia looked slightly lighter. He could see it in the way she walked, something marginally less careful about her posture. Mrs. Hale looked at Ethan over Mia's head and gave him a small nod that said, "We're okay, we're moving." In the car on the way home, Mia said, "Mrs. Hale says it's okay to tell you when something bothers me." "It is," Ethan said, "always. Even if I think you're already carrying enough." He gripped the wheel a little tighter, kept his voice even. "Especially then." She was quiet for a block. "Then, the family tree thing bothered me." "I know. I didn't know what to say about our family because I don't know very much about it, and Emma had so many pictures." A pause. "It made me feel like we were smaller than everyone else's family." "We're not smaller," he said. "We just didn't have the pictures yet." He glanced at her in the rear view. "I've been finding some things out, about where we come from. Not all of it yet, but more than I knew before. The good people thing. Yeah, that and more." He paused. "There are some things I want to tell you when I understand them better, and some things I want to introduce you to." "Introduce me to?" She frowned slightly. "You mean people? One person, maybe. Eventually." He navigated a turn. "Someone who's part of the same story, the one I've been finding out about." Mia processed this in her quiet Mia way. "A good person or a complicated person?" "Both," he said. "Definitely both." "That's okay," she said. "The interesting ones usually are." He looked at her in the mirror and thought, she is going to be something extraordinary, this kid. She already is, and she doesn't even know it. "Yeah," he said. "That's pretty much exactly right." He called Victoria that evening. "I talked to Mia," he said when she answered. "About the family story. In broad terms, nothing she's not ready for, but the shape of it." "How did she take it?" "She asked if you were a good person or a complicated person." A brief silence. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." He heard her exhale almost a laugh. "What did she say?" "She said the interesting ones usually are both." The silence this time was the warm kind. "Ethan," Victoria said, "I'd like to take you somewhere. Both of you eventually, but you first." She paused. "The Harbor Lantern. Thursday. Not the wrong table this time. The right one." He understood immediately. The Thursday reservation. The table that had been Nathan's for more than 2 decades. The table she'd been keeping week after week for 17 years. "You want to go back," he said. "I want to go forward," she said. "There's a difference." A beat. Nathan's table isn't a shrine. It never was. It was always just a table where we talked and ate and argued about things and planned too many things we never got to do. A pause. "I think it's time I had dinner with someone who's actually there." He was quiet for a moment. "Thursday, sir," he said. 7 o'clock. "I'll make sure the table is available." Victoria. "Yes. When we go, I don't want it to be about Nathan. I want it to be about us, whatever that is right now. I don't want to spend the evening as someone who carries his face or his story. I want to go as myself." He paused. "Can we do that?" She didn't answer immediately. He waited. "Yes," she said finally. "I think that's exactly what he'd want too." "I think so." "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he confirmed. He hung up and sat at his kitchen table in the quiet. The apartment around him was the same as it always was. Modest, slightly worn, warm, in the specific way that a home becomes warm, not from its furnishings, but from the accumulated weight of the life lived in it. 3 years of Mia's drawings on the refrigerator. Lauren's photograph on the shelf in the living room, the one he'd told Mia she could move, if it ever felt like too much, the one Mia had said firmly should stay exactly where it was, because it was Mama's spot. He looked at that photograph now from across the room. Lauren had been 29 in that photo. Younger than Victoria by more than a decade. She'd been laughing at something off camera, he knew exactly what new. The exact moment knew the joke Danny had said that had made her laugh at precisely the wrong time for a posed photograph and ended up being the one he kept. The one that was most like her. He thought about what's it meant to love someone and lose them and keep going. He thought about all the forms that keeping going could take. Victoria's 18-hour days and her company and her Thursday table. His own morning routines and handwritten notes and bedtime check-ins and the specific, daily exhausting, irreplaceable work of being someone's whole world. He thought about the fact that keeping going was not the same as being done. He thought Lauren would have liked Victoria. They were different in almost every way, but they shared the specific quality of knowing their own mind and not being interested in pretending otherwise. Lauren had laughed loud and lived close to the surface. Victoria lived deeper, moved more carefully. But they both had that quality, that bone-deep knowledge of who they were, worn without performance. He thought Lauren would have approved. He thought she would have said in her direct and completely Lauren way, "It's about time, Ethan." He thought she might have said it a while ago. He just hadn't been ready to hear it. He was ready now. He got up, washed out his coffee mug, turned off the kitchen light, stood in the hallway for a moment and listened to his apartment breathe around him. Then he went to check on Mia. Found her asleep with the book in her hand and the bookmark on the floor, the way she ended every night that had a good middle in it. He took the book carefully, put in the bookmark, set it on the nightstand. He pulled up the blanket. He stayed a moment. He had a Thursday reservation to look forward to. He had 87 pages of someone else's courage that had quietly been part of his own story for 16 years. He had a daughter who asked the right questions, and a neighbor who said yes without asking why, and a friend who listened without interrupting, and a woman who was learning slowly by choice to stop managing and start living. He had work to do still. He always would. That wasn't a complaint. That was just the nature of a life that had people in it. But the sealed room was open, and the air was the same everywhere. He turned off Mia's light. He went to bed. He thought just before sleep, Nathan Whitmore sat with a 22-year-old in the dark for 14 minutes and decided to leave him something. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." That felt right. That felt finally like exactly enough. Thursday came quietly, the way good things sometimes do, without announcement, without ceremony. Just the ordinary turning of a week arriving at the moment it had always been heading toward. Ethan ironed his shirt, not his uniform. A civilian shirt, dark blue, the good one he kept for occasions that mattered. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at himself the way he rarely did, not checking, not assessing, just looking. 42 years in the making. A face that had apparently carried someone else's grief for 17 years without knowing it. A face that was, he had decided, entirely his own. Mia was at Mrs. Patterson's. He had told her when he dropped her off that he was having dinner with the person he'd mentioned, the complicated but interesting one. Mia had looked at him with those gray-blue eyes that changed with the light and said, "You ironed your shirt." "I did." "You never iron your shirt." "I iron my shirt sometimes. For important things," she said. Not an accusation, an observation. The verdict was clear in her voice. This was an important thing. She approved without saying she approved, in the specific way of an 8-year-old who has decided something is okay and communicates it through the absence of objection. "Be good for Mrs. Patterson," he said. "I'm always good," she said, which was true, and they both knew it, and she went inside with her book already open in her hands. He drove to the Harbor Lantern. He had been inside this restaurant exactly once before, the night he sat down at the wrong table and a woman dropped a wine glass and looked at him like she'd seen the dead. It felt like considerably longer ago than it was. A month, give or take. The span of a month that had rearranged things he'd thought were permanent. The hostess at the front was different from the one who'd misdirected him the first time, younger, more attentive. She checked his name, smiled, and said, "Ms. Whitmore is already at the table. Right this way." He followed her back. Not the last table on the left this time. The hostess led him to the window side of the restaurant. A table he hadn't noticed on his first visit, positioned so that the harbor was visible beyond the glass. The lights of the water doing what harbor lights do, in the early dark, shifting and present and indifferent to everything happening on the shore. Victoria was there. She was wearing something the color of deep wine, her hair down again, the way it had been at her house. And she was not looking at her phone or at the menu. She was looking at the water. Quiet and self-contained and entirely present in the way she was when she wasn't performing the CEO, when she'd set down the armor, and was just herself in a room. She heard him coming and turned. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment, which was its own kind of language. By now they had gotten comfortable in the last month with the silences between words, had learned that the silences were not empty, but full of things being communicated in a register that didn't require speech. Then she said, "You ironed your shirt." He laughed. Actually laughed, not the managed social variety, but the real one that comes up from somewhere you can't fully control. My daughter said the same thing. "Smart kid." She smiled, and this time it was not the almost smile, not the almost thing he'd been tracking since the coffee shop. It was the full version. It changed her face entirely, not making it softer exactly, but more complete, like a sentence that had been waiting for its period. He sat down across from her. "This is a different table," he said. "Yes, the other one is Nathan's. It'll always be Nathan's." She held his gaze steadily. "This one is just a table, a good one. The view is better from here, actually. I'd never noticed because I always sat in the same place." 17 years is a long time to not notice a view. "It is." She picked up her menu. "I've been noticing a lot of things differently lately." They ordered. They talked. Not about the file, not about Nathan, not about the operations or the classified history or the weight of the previous weeks. They talked about other things about her company, not the professional version, but the real one. The story of its early days, when she'd been running it from a grief-dark apartment with 4 employees and a conviction she still couldn't fully explain. About his first deployment, the specific texture of being 20 years old and suddenly responsible for things that mattered enormously. About Mia, he told stories, the good ones. The ones that made Victoria laugh with genuine surprise, like the time Mia had submitted a formal written complaint to the school lunch program about the quality of the macaroni and cheese, structured as a business proposal with suggested improvements at the age of 7. "She did not," Victoria said. "I have the document. She made me proofread it." "What did you say?" "I told her the argument was sound, but she might want to soften the opening line." "What was the opening line?" "The current macaroni and cheese does not meet reasonable standards of quality and represents a failure of institutional responsibility." Victoria put her hand over her mouth, and the laugh that came out from behind it was the kind he hadn't heard from her yet, unguarded, full, the laugh of someone who had forgotten for a moment to be careful. It was a remarkable sound. He thought he'd like to hear it regularly. He thought that was a specific and intentional thing to want, and he let himself want it without apology. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said when she'd recovered. "She is." He said it simply, without false modesty. "She's going to run something someday. I don't know what yet, but something." "She already is. She's running you." "She has been since she was 3. He smiled. "I accepted my position early." Victoria looked at him across the table with an expression that was both reading him and deciding something, the two things happening simultaneously, the way they often did with her. "Can I ask you something personal? You've read 87 pages of classified material about me," he said. "I think we're past asking permission for personal." "Fair." She set her fork down. "Lauren, your wife. How do you carry that, I ask, because I've spent 17 years trying to figure out how to carry Nathan, and I'm not sure I've been doing it the right way. You seem like you found something that works." He thought about it honestly. He didn't reach for the comfortable answer. "I don't think there's a right way," he said. "I think there's just the way you do it, which changes as you go." He paused. "For a long time I carried Lauren by not putting her down, keeping every piece of her exactly where it was, like if I moved anything, the version of her I had left would break." He looked at the table. "The problem with that is you can't add anything when your arms are already full." "What changed?" "Mia got older. Started asking questions I didn't have answers to." and I realized Lauren would have been furious with me. He said it with a warmth that told Victoria everything about the marriage it came from. She was not a woman who would have wanted to be held so tight that nothing else could get in. She was the opposite of that. She had too much energy, too much life. She would have said, "Ethan, put me down somewhere safe and go live your life." He paused. "So I'm trying." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Nathan would have said the same thing. He actually did say it more or less, in the transcript. She picked up her wine glass. "I just wasn't ready to hear it when I read it." "Are you now?" She held the glass without drinking, looked at the light through it. "I think that's what tonight is," she said. "I think I'm proving to myself that I can be here at this restaurant on a Thursday with someone who matters without it being a betrayal and without it being a replacement." She set the glass down. "It's neither of those things." "No," Ethan said. "It isn't. It's just new." She said the word carefully, like she was testing its weight. New is terrifying when you've been operating on the same grief for 17 years. New means the grief is not going away, but changing shape. Becoming something you hold differently. A pause. "I'm not sure I know how to do that yet." "I don't think you have to know how yet," he said. "I think you just have to be willing." She looked at him. "Are you willing?" he asked. The question sat between them with everything it carried, not a romantic ultimatum, not a demand. Just the real question, asked plainly by a man who had learned at some cost that plain questions were the only ones worth asking. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing." "Then that's enough for right now." She nodded, picked up her fork. They ate, and the harbor lights moved on the water outside the window, and the restaurant settled into its Thursday evening rhythm around them, and it was, Ethan thought, remarkably ordinary. Remarkably, specifically, wonderfully ordinary. Two people eating dinner at a good table by a window, talking about things that mattered and things that didn't, learning each other in the specific way you learn someone when you've already been through something significant together, and now you're finding out who they are when the significant thing isn't the center of the room anymore. This was the part Nathan had tried to point her toward. Not the grief, not the revelation, not the dramatic unraveling of 17 years of careful structure. This dinner. Conversation. Someone across the table who was actually there. Ethan thought Nathan would have been satisfied. He thought Nathan had been in some specific and unmeasurable way exactly right about all of it. When they left the restaurant 2 hours later, the dinner unhurried, the conversation moving through territories neither of them had expected, they stood on the sidewalk in the cool air with the harbor behind them and the ordinary sounds of a city evening around them. Victoria pulled her coat tighter, looked at him. "Same time next week," she said. It was a simple question. It was also not a simple question. It was the question of someone choosing deliberately and with full information to step toward something new. To put down the old weight and see what her arms could carry when they were free. "Same time next week," he said. She held out her hand. He took it. Not a handshake this time, just held it for a moment, the way people do when words have been sufficient for everything else, but this particular thing needs contact to be real. Then she let go, walked to her car. Didn't look back, which he was learning was simply how she moved forward without checking if the past was following. He stood there for a moment after her car pulled away. The harbor was dark and moving behind him. The air was the specific coolness of a night that was going to be fine. He drove to pick up Mia. She was still awake. She always was when he was out late. A fact that Mrs. Patterson reported with a kind of fond exasperation. She waits up but won't admit it. Just sits there reading with her light on. When he came through the door, Mia was on Mrs. Patterson's couch, with the book very convincingly pretending she hadn't been listening for his car. "Good book," he said. "Very good," she said, not looking up. He waited. She looked up, studied his face with the assessment that could see through every managed expression he'd ever tried. "You look different." "Do I? Like something is settled?" She frowned slightly, searching for the word. "You usually look like you're still working something out even when you're here. Right now you look like you worked it out." He sat down next to her on the couch. Mrs. Patterson appeared briefly in the kitchen doorway, took one look at the two of them, and quietly disappeared again. She was very good at knowing when to leave a room. "I think I did work some things out," he said. "The complicated person. Partly. And some other stuff. Old stuff that needed finishing." He paused. "Mia, do you remember when you asked where we come from? And I said we come from good people." She put the book down. This was a real conversation. She treated real conversations differently from regular ones, with her full attention, her full self. He had given her that, he realized. Modeled it without knowing. All those years of sitting with her fully present, even when he was exhausted, she had learned what it looked like. "Yeah," she said. "I want to tell you more now. Not everything, some of it is for when you're older. But the part that matters most." He looked at her. "A long time ago, before you were born, there was a man who did very important and very dangerous work that nobody knew about. He protected a lot of people without them ever knowing he was the one doing it." He paused. "He met me once, very briefly. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he noticed me, and he said something through a message I didn't find for a long time, that he believed we were good people, our family." Mia was very still. "Why did he believe that?" "Because of what I did, even when no one was watching." Ethan paused. He thought that was the test. Not what you do when people are watching. What you do in the dark, when nobody knows, when there's no reward for doing it right. She absorbed this in her quiet way. "Is he the person connected to the one you had dinner with?" "Yes, she was his wife." He watched her face. "He died a long time ago. She's been carrying that for a very long time. And the things he left behind, the things he said and did at the very end, they ended up connected to us, to our family, to who we are." Mia looked at the window for a moment, then back at him. "So, she's part of our story." "I think so. Yeah." "And we're part of hers." "Yes." She nodded slowly, the way she processed things that were large, with the careful gravity of a person who understands that some information deserves to be held gently. "I'd like to meet her. She'd like to meet you too." He paused. "She knew about you before you existed, in a way. The man Nathan, he said something about you, about a future daughter I'd have someday. He didn't know your name or your face, but he thought you'd be worth knowing." He held her gaze. He was right. Mia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful in the way it was when something had gotten all the way inside her, past the careful exterior to the real place underneath. "He didn't know me, and he thought I was worth knowing." "Yes. Because of you. Because of what you did." "Because of who we are," Ethan said. "Both of us. The family we made." She leaned against him. Then, not dramatically, not with a rush of emotion, just the quiet sideways lean of a child who has decided the person next to them is the right place to be. He put his arm around her. She was still so small. She always surprised him. "Okay," she said. "Tell me when it's time to meet her." "I will." They sat like that for a while. Mrs. Patterson made tea nobody had asked for, and left it on the coffee table with the particular grace of someone who understood that the most useful thing she could do was put something warm within reach and then disappear. Eventually Ethan said, "Time to go home." "I know." She didn't move for another moment. Then, "Dad." "Yeah, I think this is the settled thing, isn't it? The thing that was missing." She tilted her head slightly. "Not that anything was wrong, but there was something you were waiting to find out. And now you know it." He looked at the top of her head, at the part in her hair, at the specific shape of the person his daughter was becoming day by day in ways he sometimes caught and sometimes missed and tried always to be present for. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's exactly what it is." She nodded satisfied, got up, collected her book, said goodnight to Mrs. Patterson with the formal courtesy she maintained even half asleep, walked to the door and waited for him. He gathered his coat, He looked around Mrs. Patterson's apartment for a moment. The ordinary warmth of it, the plants on the windowsill, the family photographs on the wall, the evidence of a life built carefully and maintained with love over many years. He thought, this is what it looks like. A life built carefully, a life maintained with love. He thought, I am building this. I have been building it all along, even when I couldn't see it. They drove home through quiet streets. Mia was asleep before they were halfway there. The effortless, sudden sleep of children, the one that adults spend years trying to remember how to access. He drove carefully the way he always did with her in the car. He thought about the month behind him, the wrong table and the shattered glass and Marcus Webb at 3 a.m. and a transcript that changed the shape of 17 years, and an 87-page file that gave a name and a face and a 14-minute conversation to the part of his own history he'd always left sealed. He thought about a man he had carried through 4 miles of darkness, not knowing who he was, not needing to know, just knowing it was a person, and people deserved to be carried. He thought about all the ways that single act had traveled forward through time. Through the commendation, through the transcript, through a woman who had spent 17 years building something her dead husband believed in before it existed, through a Thursday table kept for 17 years in a restaurant by the harbor. Through this specific night, this specific car, this specific child asleep in the back seat with her book clutched loosely in her hand. He thought Nathan Whitmore did something remarkable in his 14 minutes. He chose what to spend them on. He chose forward-pointing things, not backward, not on grief or regret, or the injustice of a life cut short. He spent his remaining time building a bridge to something he wouldn't cross, but believed someone else would. And he had been right. Someone else had crossed it. Several people had crossed it one way or another because of the bridges Nathan had chosen to build in the time he had left. That was the thing about doing the right thing in the dark. Nathan had said it himself in the operational log in his very last recorded words. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Not triumphant, not celebrated, just right. The feeling of alignment between who you are and what you do, even when no one is watching, even when the cost is everything, even when you will not be there to see what it builds. Ethan carried his daughter up the stairs, tucked her in, found the bookmark, placed it, turned off the light. He stood in the kitchen for a while, not thinking hard, not working anything out, just being in the room, present in it. The modest apartment, the old furniture, the coffee rings on the table, and the drawings on the refrigerator, and Lauren's photograph on the shelf in the next room, and the sound of Mia breathing in the dark. He thought, this is the life I built. It is not perfect. It has seams and costs, and the specific kinds of worn places that a life acquires when it's actually lived in. But it is mine, and it is whole, and it is... He found standing in the kitchen at 11:30 on a Thursday night in the most ordinary version of himself he knew enough. More than enough. The kind of enough that has weight to it. He was going to have dinner next Thursday with a woman who was learning to put down 17 years of careful structure and discover what her life looked like when it had room in it. He was going to watch his daughter meet someone new, and see how she opened up around a person who already believed in her before they'd exchanged a word. He was going to submit a final report addendum to the legal office next week, closing the record on Operation Iron Veil in a way that honored what it had actually contained. He was going to keep reporting to base at 0600 and ironing his uniform and packing Mia's bag and leaving handwritten notes on the counter for her to find. He was going to keep carrying whatever needed carrying. That was not a burden. That was a calling. And he had known it was his calling since he was 22 years old, running through the dark towards something most people were running away from with no particular reason, except that leaving someone behind had been in every cell of his body simply impossible. Nathan Whitmore had seen it in him in 14 minutes. It had taken Ethan 40 years to see it in himself. But some things take the time they take. Some truths wait not because they don't exist yet, but because you aren't ready to receive them. And when you're finally ready, they don't arrive with noise and commotion. They arrive the way good things tend to arrive, quietly, in an ordinary moment, in the middle of an ordinary night, when you're standing in your kitchen, and the apartment is breathing around you, and your daughter is asleep, and the world outside is doing what the world does. They arrive and they are simply true, and they have been true all along. Ethan Calloway turned off the kitchen light. He walked to his room. He was a Navy officer and a single father, and a man who had carried a stranger through 4 miles of darkness, and not known for 16 years what that had built. He was a man who had lost his wife and raised his daughter alone, and eaten leftovers over the sink at 9 p.m. for 3 years, and kept going because stopping was never a real option. He was a man who had sat down at the wrong table in a restaurant and set something in motion that changed the shape of 2 lives that had been waiting without knowing it to find each other. He was, as a dead man had correctly observed in 14 final minutes, the kind of person who did the right thing in the dark. He was enough. He had always been enough. And tomorrow, and every tomorrow after that, for as long as he had them, he would wake up and pack his daughter's bag and leave the note and walk out into whatever the day required, and he would carry what needed carrying, and he would find that it was lighter than it used to be because the sealed room was open now, and the air in there was the same clean air as everywhere else, and he was not doing it alone anymore. Some wrong tables turn out to be exactly the right place to sit. Some strangers turn out to be the people you are always going to know. Some 14 minutes last a lifetime. And some men who spend their whole lives doing the right thing in the dark finally step into the light and find that everything they built while nobody was watching was exactly precisely completely enough.